Hi, this is Ed Cohen, your broadcast host on Global TV, coming to you today from San Diego, California. It's a little after 8:30 in the morning here. We have May gray and June gloom here in mid-August, but real humid. So our special guest today is Dr. Natalie Forrest, who's coming to us from the Baltimore, Washington area. And we're going to be talking about being better, resilience, being creative, reinventing, things like
Mm,
that. Also on the program, a special guest, Rene Stegmann from Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you for being here. Dr. Natalie,
sure.
tell us how you are keeping busy these days in what I call the new now. And I'm sure you get your hands full because I would imagine that quote unquote mental health is a kind of a key issue. There's so many people working from home and the grind of that, particularly for people who maybe have a partner or a spouse in the house or a limited internet capability, and there's a demand for being online. Dr. Natalie, what is hot for you?
Well, everything is hot for me, but I think the most important thing is I'm going to spin your question a little bit. That this is a really great time at the same instance where it's devastating. What I mean by that, it's devastating the loss of life. It's devastating how we're not able to come together. On the other hand, it's a fantastic time because we're called to re-examine who we are. We're finally having a time to not just busy ourselves, but we actually get to meet the person we live with, which sometimes can be very, very fascinating, and adjusting to all of that. And that can be the person, like the spouse or the grandparents or the children, can even be the animals. Like my cats look at us like, what in heaven's name are you still doing here? Like you're like here too much. It's like, leave. So you get to know people. And therefore, I think this is a time to go inwards. And once people start exploring the inwards, they then say, whoa, what's all this? And they need a lot of help. The biggest challenge, I think, is for parents right now, because parents have their jobs. They try to figure out how to do their jobs right now. A lot of them, as you rightfully pointed out, are not necessarily online, or they don't have the setup. And they might interact with countries. Cape Town might be a little different, but I have a lot of connections in Uganda and Nigeria. They don't have the internet. Even in the US, not everybody has internet. So how are you going to do your work? And a lot when it comes to organizations has been focused on walking by somebody's office and making sure they're in the office. So it's a new development for trusting and for really connecting with the people you work with on a different level. This remote stuff, I think, is fantastic to renew our leadership styles. So that's the long story, if that answers your question at all.
It sure does, and thanks for that insight. So Renee, in your industry, your business, Relocation Africa, your team is remote, right?
Yeah, so we had a severe lockdown right in the beginning where the only thing we were allowed to do was to go to the shops for essential items. Other than that, it was for 5 weeks absolutely no one into the office, no unnecessary travel, very tight curfews. So actually, and just I resonate so well with what you just said in terms of adjusting your leadership head in terms of, I didn't ever want anyone to kind of work from home, because I guess there was not necessarily mistrust, but like you feel like you've got more control when everyone's in your space. And so you could, be creative together. You could, sort of monitor or help or guide or coach people. And so it's actually been a remarkable shift, because now we are back in the office, not very flexibly. So we allow people to come in on certain days, certain hours even. And so I even got someone returning from maternity shortly, and she's, asking how flexible could her work hours be, and we're like, yeah, no, it's all good. We can really work around what the need is, because we were instantly able to take our laptops home and continue work as normal. So it was incredible, and it has been a huge mind shift for us in leadership with our teams, and I think they've appreciated a lot of it. And I think they're kind of watching the space carefully to see, when things start returning back to normal, how we continue to operate.
I think you made such a great point about the creativity, because there is a different energy when you're together. It's not just the control aspect, but you're absolutely right. If you're trying to be creative or come up with solutions, there sometimes is a different energy when you're in the same room. I love live events or live meetings, because you're in the same room. You can get up and nobody's offended. You can get up and say, I just need to walk while I'm thinking. Now when you get up on a Zoom call or whatever technology you're using, it's like, well, the person's gone. The brain goes in a different direction. So, it's both of those. And regardless of how many programs we use, there is a little bit of a difference, very, very much so. You can't just, look at each other over the cup of coffee and smell the coffee at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Dr. Natalie, give us some insight from a doctor's point of view of people working from home and the kids running around and the pressure of homeschooling, and what do you know about teaching? How do you know the kid is actually learning something? So, and all that pressure. And, there was somebody posting earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday on LinkedIn, that how many more days do I have to put up with this, quote unquote? And, corporate managers, meaning from big companies, there's only some tolerance that those people have, because they're human too, and they're going through the same thing. And so, what's happening with relationships at work as a result of the remoteness?
Yeah. I think relationships is the key. Like I mentioned earlier, all of a sudden you actually get to know your spouse. That can be an added stressor in your life. Or going, as an educator, going to, does my child really learn? I've noticed this spring, it was spring, I lose track of time. In the spring, how many of the other parents apparently had no ideas about what was happening in school. Now, I'm very blessed, and I guess my child is very unfortunate because I'm an educator. So, we talk a lot about this stuff. And so I've always homeschooled in one way or another, in addition to what's happening at school, because she wants to learn. There is learning going on, and it depends on your preferences. I was talking with another educator, a friend of mine in Chicago, who teaches special needs children and adults. And he said, for example, some of them were thriving in the online environment because, they want to be alone. They prefer not to be in a group setting. And others were just getting worse and worse by the minute. So I think that the psychological impact on what is happening is beginning slowly to bubble up. And the only way we can take care of it is the human commitment piece, which is you first have to commit to yourself. Whether that means you get up half an hour early and, have your cup of coffee before everybody gets up, whether you go out, you need your alone time, because all of a sudden you don't have it. And that means, not just for managers, but for everyday people. You have a child in the house, you have a spouse. I mean, how do you even get to your family members who live across town? Those are pressures, added pressures. We've always had them. And that's why I always talk about the human part of leadership, right? Where the leader, the manager, needs to walk around the offices and actually know their employees' names, know what's happening with their family to build that trust. Well, now you don't have a whole lot of choice. You really need to know what's going on. You need to call up your employee and say, hey, do you actually have internet? Hey, what's going on? So those conversations open up a whole new relationship level. And when you mention the CEOs and those people, they now have to really look at team building. Yeah, who is on my team? And be willing to be what I would call true leaders and understand that they're not responsible for all. If they don't empower their team members, they cannot sustainably succeed.
Yeah. So in an earlier talk show with me, Dr. Natalie, you mentioned something about patterns. How we all have patterns, ways of doing things from yesteryear, and we bring them into the workplace years later. Would you comment on that and how that's impacted when you're not in the office environment and patterns? Now do you do patterns at home, and
Oh,
then your spouse or says, "Who are you?"
yeah. Very much so. I mean, we all have our patterns, right? And on the one hand, we talk about patterns more in routines. You know, you walk into the office, you turn on the AC, you bring in your coffee. So all those things are those routine items. They are more like autopilot. And then you've got the subconscious patterns. Those are your attitudes. Those are the areas where are you more prone to be positively minded or negatively minded? And the more all those areas are under stress where you don't have a release, the more aggravating they're getting. So, for example, if you're already a multitasker, going to the office can be extremely helpful because you have no real distractions, right? You can't just say, I got to do the laundry. Oh, let me check what's in the fridge. You're in an office. Okay. So that makes it easier. When you are not a multitasker, the issue can be that you get stuck on whatever you're working on at home on the computer. And you are also maybe not feeling so self-confident. So you're not going to ask anybody. So for 12 hours, you're sitting in front of the computer trying to figure something out. And you're getting scared, and then you get even more worried because you're not turning in the work that you were supposed to, but the computer's not up to speed. Should you tell your superior? Should you not? All of those things. So what you do at that point is you become really, really, really stressed and depressed, which goes to stress management. And one of the first things we do is we start eating and drinking. So, and those are our defense mechanisms. Or we start calling or avoiding the phone when our supervisor calls us. And when we finally get them, we're like, I had a power outage. The computer, we make up excuses. Because all of that is, however, due to the fact that the relationships hadn't been established before. So the patterns influence everything we do. We blame others. We think it's the other department's fault. They didn't communicate a certain way. We can always make up excuses. And that has to really do with our level of, number one, self-confidence, and then the confidence in our team members, which we and the leader of the team are responsible for.
So let me ask you how, let's just say a woman, okay, and not the top executive, but an executive, say a VP of marketing, um, and the bosses that she has are demanding, okay, rather than being human. They want goals and they want it yesterday and things like that, right? So, and now this person is working remotely, and the boss is looking for results. How do we pay the bills next month? We need more revenue or more productivity. So, how does this executive uh, manage that relationship under this new stress? It's not a. I'm sure it's a multiplex answer,
Right.
but I'm asking a simple question, which is sort of not not proper, is it?
Well, I think it is proper because it all goes to the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue is, do you have a human relationship with anybody that you work with? And is everybody empowered to assist in the mission? That is the heart, that's the core of the issue. Do they even know what the mission is? If you just tell them you need to make 100 postcards, why? It's like they're going to do it, but they're not going to enjoy it. Then they slow down. If they don't have what they need at home to do it, they can do it even less. So whatever we talk about, it comes to communication and relationship. Do you know who you have in front of you? Do they understand why you're getting stressed? And I understand fully and entirely that most businesses look at the end number. And as we have been seeing and continue to see right now, that actually is not a good approach. Because if you're only looking at the end number, like one of my books talks about that, in the healthcare industry or wherever you have representatives doing calls, they have a certain amount of calls they have to make, for example. And that is not at all conducive to the company. If they were making less calls, but would be able to be more relational in the calls, more customers would stay and return. So looking at the final number versus looking at how are we retaining our customers? What is the lifetime value of our customer? That is contradictory. You can't just look at how many calls do we make and forget that thereby you're losing your customers. And that's what we've seen in a lot of companies. I mean, look at the bank, look at the health insurances. People are upset. They feel like their numbers, they don't matter. They're being taken advantage of. They go to different banks, especially in the US. We have so many new banks popping up. And a lot of the banks also then have an added feature of being pro-environment, like every fee that you pay or something goes part. So there is that connection of, if you only look at the numbers, you're a manager, you're not a leader. So empower your employees, and Rene keeps nodding, so I think that's everything that she's doing. You need to talk to your employees or your subordinates or your team and say, okay, this is where we are. The boss says we need 20 of these. I don't know why we need it. He says we do. Is there a way for us to produce it? You need to make it a team effort. And you need to have everybody on the team on the mission.
So a friend of mine and former guest on my radio show last year, Paul Falcone, he's he's a product of Hollywood, as Paramount Pictures and Viacom, and as HR leader a number of years. He's now concentrating on writing books, and he's a well-published guy on this. So anyway, he gave me a quote for an article that I wrote about how at this time, managers, senior managers, and bosses can make or break what's going to be their company after all this is passed or changed. In that, they need to get off their productivity walkathon or whatever you want to call it, and think about how to build a team spirit. Yes. And that mirrors almost exactly what you were saying. So Rene, I want to throw to you because you have managers all over the continent of Africa, which is a huge place. How do you deal with all this?
Yeah, so I can obviously relate to so much that's been said, but in terms, one of our strategies from the get-go was communication, to almost over-communicate instead of under-communicate or hold back communication. In this time, VUCA, I think you've mentioned it before, it's, volatility, uncertainty. I can't remember all of it, the acronym, but it certainly is a really, the continent of Africa is pretty used to being in this real uncertain time. So I would say that we strategized and decided that we were going to push a lot of communication down the channel to make sure everyone was aware exactly what Natalie was saying was, to really understand why we were wanting to do things, or even if we didn't know the answers, that we were still communicating. We didn't hold back that communication. So that was the first thing. Also, I think with the uncertainty that VUCA brings, and something like this pandemic, we decided to try and comfort and give certainty where possible. So everything in our strategy going forward with our clients, with our staff, with any stakeholder, we want to give them certainty wherever we can. So that again reinforced that sense of communication. And what we're mostly dealing with, which actually is quite interesting, is change. We've gone from this normal to this complete abnormal, which is a change. And now we're starting to transition back to some sense of normality, which again is change. And so again, we've started that rhythm of communicate, so that everybody is aware, preparing their heads and minds of what those things are that we want them to do going forward. So it's been a challenge, and we've had pushback, but the communication and clarity and certainty has provided a little bit of comfort along the way.
So, Dr. Natalie, back to the basics of communications, whether it's between partners and spouse or employees or executives. How would you recommend that people go from conflict to resolution?
I think Rene sort of hit it on the nails when she said, share everything, even the unknown. So first and foremost is always honesty and integrity, always. You need to be able to tell your people, it looks as if we're going to do this. And you need to then, I think the third really important aspect is vulnerability, which goes together with integrity and honesty. You need to be able to tell your employees or your spouse or your child, I'm a bit stressed. I need some time for myself. Or I don't have the answers either. Especially when it comes to children, we sometimes underestimate them. They know exactly what we're feeling, whether we say it or not, so we might as well say it. And if we're not honest to our employees, then we're going to destroy the company. And what I mean by that is there's very often companies have this great idea of they're taking a survey of answers from their employees, right? I mean, that is probably one of the least effective things I can imagine. The reason why I'm saying that, because I personally have filled those out. And for some reason, what some of my colleagues back then and I fill out never made it into the official report. Because the report at the end was always, we're a great place to work at. Everybody loves it. And we're looking at each other like going, what? There's at least like 50 of us who said no. So, you need to be honest about things. So when you're opening a conversation, always do what Rene seems to be doing, be empowering, saying, this is what it is. We think we're going to do A, but we're open-minded to other suggestions. And when it comes to a situation like right now, but also always in general, a lot of companies have created these employee benefits programs where they can go to see a counselor or a therapist. It's a great idea, and it's not working. The reason why it's not working is because it's directly tied to the organization. And if there's no trust between the organization and the employee, people are worried to go to a counselor, and the counselor is somehow going to show up on their HR thing, even if they're not allowed to share what was being talked about. But the employee thinks, oh my God, my boss is going to know that I saw a counselor. And so they don't go, which is why a lot of other great services are popping up left and right on the internet via apps. Just talk, BFF. I mean, there are a lot of them that are popping up where people feel that they can talk. Now, for them, then the problem becomes, who's going to pay for this? So there is this high I don't know what to call, like a high roping act. That's not the right word, but my German keeps creeping in the background, where you're like trying to figure out where to go. On the one hand, people need to be productive. So how do I empower them? But you also want to acknowledge them as human beings. And one way that I have seen done very well, and it's almost difficult for me to admit that, but it was done very well, was where a big company actually said, you know what? We're actually going to open up a third avenue, not just come to work in person and we're trying to make it safe or work remotely. They also said, if you feel so stressed and depressed right now, we're going to work with you. We're going to give you a pass. You don't even have to necessarily say, go see a counselor. If you just say you're so stressed because your mom, your dad, you have some, if you feel stressed and feel that you're going to freak out having to come back to the office, we're going to give you a pass on that just for you feeling that way. Now that is huge. That is huge. Now people are going, wow, you're actually acknowledging that. So the communication has to be honesty, integrity, and vulnerability, all with the aim to embrace all of the knowledge and expertise that we have in the team or in the company, because everybody has an idea and we just need to listen to them. And if Rene sends out a message to her people and I, let's just assume I'm one of them, and I say, I don't agree with this path, then Rene can say, oh, so what do you got? And we can discuss it. My idea might still be completely impossible to implement because I don't know all the ins and out of the higher level of the company, but she'll be able to explain it to me. And then I can jump back in. So it's really, I think those three items are key in any communication, including your spouse and your children or whoever else is around you.
So it's got to be, that's the culture thing, and it's not HR's role, although it often is. It's really the responsibility of the
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
the chief,
Yeah.
to say it's okay. You know, we still have to produce things, but we're all human here,
Yeah.
and so that
Yeah.
create that feeling of being safe,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
clean and safe.
change. Yeah. We're talking about a culture change. And Rene, I think, used the same word. Some companies have been doing that for years, and they are the ones who are still around. They are the ones that don't have a high turnover in employees. The ones where you don't have it, they have to constantly recruit because people don't feel safe.
Right, right. So we have about 15 minutes left on this, and Dr. Natalie, I want to ask you to get into some psycho talk here about how people can deal with the unknown.
So the easy answer, and it might not necessarily be psycho talk, is you don't know anything anyhow. So what does it matter? What are you afraid of? Okay, that's the easy answer. If you don't know what's going to happen, you can look at it two ways. You can have a positive mindset and look at it as an opportunity, or you can have a negative mindset that says, oh my God, what's behind this door? It's going to kill me. No pun intended, but that is where we are. And for years and years, most societies have taught us to be afraid of what is unknown. And I'm even talking small societies, churches, community centers, little organizations. It doesn't matter whether you're big or small, but you set a certain parameter, and that even includes how we deal with each other. Be afraid of before you even approach somebody and know them. So it's all in here. It's really us needing to unravel those constructs. And the best way to do that is to go back and remember when we were children, because we sure weren't afraid of anything. We would not even worry about turning that corner or opening that door. The time that we start worrying about that is when somebody said, well, wait, I don't know what's behind there. And so that is sort of the most psychological that I want to get. The other piece is really about understanding that we don't ever know what's next. You can plan every little step. We can plan this interview. It's planned. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. I mean, I had problems logging on, right? So you don't know what's going to happen. So life is about the experience. And the experience means whatever comes, am I strong enough to deal with it? Which goes to, do you love yourself and do you have self-confidence? I mean, there are all these decisions. We never know what's next. We can plan everything. Right now, during this very challenging time, we've lost a lot of people. Now, most of them probably didn't know that they would be lost. Their family members didn't expect them. I mean, it's not just one group of people right now. So you never know what's going to happen. Let go of the illusion that you know what's going to happen. I'm going to bring in my mom right now, which might seem left field, but she loves writing down the plans. She's got all these ideas she's planning on. Then she writes another big plan. Oh, I'm going to do this month. I'm going to do 2 weeks later, she has to change it. It's just like a business plan, right? You have to go with the flow. Life is like a business plan. You don't know. Nobody expected COVID. So we have to deal with it. Change is something that is the only constant in life is change, whether you like it or not. That means the only constant in life is not knowing what happens next, regardless of how well you plan for it. That needs to be accepted. And the only way that that can be accepted is if we trust ourselves and our partners, our family members, and as an extension, our teams to be there with us and have our back.
So, Dr. Natalie, I want to share that you and I have had extensive conversations over the years, and one we just had with your business associates on all of this related to small business and making that work. So Rene has her own business, obviously able to survive all these years, and hopefully with able to withstand the pressures that we're all under right now. So Dr. Natalie, as CEO of that enterprise, and your one partner that I had the pleasure of talking with the other day, transfer some of this thinking that you were just talking about to the trauma of running a small business and trying to survive today.
Absolutely. Thank you for that opportunity. It's the same kind of principle. When you're building a business, are you putting all of your pieces together the right way? Meaning that your business is, in psychoterms, self-confident and can withstand anything. Okay, that's really where we are. The only way that you can ensure that is if all of those building blocks, as we call them, are in place. Think about it more as a house. If you don't build a foundation and there's a storm, what's going to happen? I mean, it's logic. So the trauma of running a business never goes away, or the challenge of running a business. That's why we're entrepreneurs, because we like not knowing what's going to happen next, as scary as it can be. If we have all our building blocks in place, from seed stage all the way up to wherever we are, then we don't have to worry as much because we know we've got the foundation. The foundation of a business is the self-confidence of the owner and the first building blocks. Just like in our personal lives, our self-confidence means we can or we won't. So in a business, it means you also take inventory. You look back at, do I have everything? You look just like what I said at the beginning of our conversation. This is a great time to look inwards. It's a great time for entrepreneurs. I mean, I'm doing so much work on the back end of my businesses. It's fantastic. I finally have the time. I can actually connect with people. So it is about looking back at, do I have all of the pieces of the puzzle in place? Have I missed anything? Why is this part not working out? Why am I not getting the best advice possible? Well, do you have a board of directors? Do you have the right people on your board of directors? Do you have that support system that you need? And from there you go down. What does my team look like? Do I have the best possible human beings in those areas? And whether you take inventory the way that we recommend it or any other way, this is the perfect time. And you will lessen not just the stress by building your business the right way, the sustainable way, but looking at it not from money, how much money can I make, just like the big organizations, but looking at it, how can I be sustainable? What value do I provide to customers, clients, and employees? Looking at it really more holistically, and setting your business up that way with the value of your customer in mind, and then looking at, am I sustainable? Am I going to be able in 10 years to hand the business over, or in 5 years, either sell it and do something new? Those are all steps along the way that can ease it, because you have specific pillars in place that will not be blown away by a hurricane, a tornado, or COVID. They are there, they're plastered. So that would be my connection to, just ensuring that you take the right steps and review if you're not sure, with the focus on sustainability and what value are you providing to others.
Thank you so much for this. Natalie, what's the website that people can find you on?
My website is very easy. It's natalieforrest.com.
Okay, that's great. And Rene, what's your website?
It is relocationafrica.com.
Okay, that's cool. I want to thank you both for being my special guest today on Global TV. I've learned a lot, and I relieved. I've taken off all this pressure off myself by listening to you both, and I hope you feel good too.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Meeting you, Rene. I'm so glad you're on.
Yeah, thank you. And lovely to hear you. And I totally resonate with everything you've just said about business. So it's really, really gives it one confidence.
Good.
So I want to encourage you guys to get together. So,
Absolutely.
our I'm so used to bringing people together in person, all these years.
Yeah.
So this is it now, together.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. We could talk
Ed.
all day, but enough. Have a good day and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao. Bye bye.